I've seen thousands of cases walk through my courtroom over the years. Most blend together after a while: routine violations, standard penalties, people who pay their fines and move on with their lives. Some are forgettable, others, they stay with you, not because of the ticket, but because of the story behind it. Because of the human being standing at that podium, trying to explain a moment that changed everything. That particular morning started like any other. Docket was full, the coffee was strong, and I was prepared for another day of traffic violations and municipal infractions. But sometimes, life has other plans. I saw a man step up to the podium around 10:30 a.m. He was dressed neatly but plainly navy sweater that had seen better days, worn-out jeans with a small patch on the knee, shoes that looked like they'd walked through a few too many rainy parking lots. His hair was slightly disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. His name was David Morales. In his weathered hand, he held a manila folder stuffed with papers, receipts, what looked like a work schedule, and peeking out from the corner, a hand-drawn picture in crayon that immediately caught my attention. His violation seemed straightforward enough on paper: speeding 42 in a 30 zone on Maple Street, right in front of Roosevelt Elementary School. Nothing outrageous by today's standards. No accident, no property damage, no injuries. Just another speeding ticket that would typically result in a standard fine and a reminder to slow down in school zones. But I've learned over my years on the bench that the paper rarely tells the whole story. I looked up at him and asked the question I always ask, the one that sometimes changes everything. "Mr. Morales, why were you speeding that morning?" And that's when the story changed completely. David didn't begin right away. He stood there for a long moment, his thumb nervously tracing the edge of that folder. I could see him gathering his thoughts, maybe his courage. Then he looked up at me with tired but determined eyes and said, quietly, "Your Honor, I was trying to get to my daughter's school on time." His daughter's name was Emily. 8 years old, 2nd grade. She had a performance that morning, a little school play called The Forest Friends, where all the kids played different parts of nature. Emily had been cast as a tree, not the lead role, not even a speaking part, just a tree. But to hear David tell it, you'd think she was starring on Broadway. She had worked on her costume for days, he told me, painting cardboard leaves in different shades of green and brown, carefully gluing sequins onto an old green sweatshirt to make it sparkle like morning dew. She had practiced her tree pose every night before bed, standing perfectly still with her arms stretched out like branches, barely able to contain her excitement. David said with a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, it was important to her, and so it was important to him. David worked the overnight shift at a delivery warehouse across town, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week. It was hard work, loading and unloading trucks, but it was steady pay and, more importantly, it meant he could be home during the day when Emily needed him most. That morning, his shift ended at 6 a.m. sharp. Emily had to be at school by 7:45 for the performance. The timeline was always tight, but they had done it dozens of times before. After his shift, he would drive straight to their small apartment on the other side of town, help Emily get ready, pack her lunch with extra care, always including a note with a smiley face, and they would leave with just enough time to make it to school. But that morning, nothing went according to plan. I hadn't slept in almost 20 hours, David admitted, but I never missed one of Emily's school events, not one. And I wasn't going to start that day. They hit unexpected construction on 3rd Avenue, a water main break that had the street torn up and traffic backed up for blocks. Then they got stuck behind a slow-moving school bus that stopped at every single corner, picking up kids who seemed to take forever to get on board. Then, as if the universe was testing him, they hit a traffic light that seemed broken, taking forever to cycle through its colors. David kept checking the clock on his dashboard, 7:35, 7:40, 7:43. So, he did what a lot of desperate parents do in that situation. He pressed just a little harder on the gas pedal when the road finally cleared, and right after that, just 2 blocks from the school, the camera flash went off. The ticket. I leaned forward and asked him, "Mr. Morales, why not arrange for someone else to drive Emily that morning? A neighbor? A family member? Surely someone could understand the situation." His smile was soft but sad when he answered, "Your Honor, There's no one else. The silence in the courtroom was profound. David was a single father. Emily's mother had moved across the country to California a year and a half earlier for what she called a fresh start. She had promised to stay in touch, promised to visit, promised Emily they would still be a family, even if they lived far apart. But the calls became less frequent, then stopped altogether. The last Christmas card had been returned to sender. "I work nights so I can be with Emily during the day," David explained. "I can't afford daycare, and honestly, I wouldn't want to miss this time with her anyway. She's growing up so fast." He told me about their daily routine, how he would pick her up from school every afternoon, and they would go to the park or the library, how they would cook dinner together, usually something simple like spaghetti or grilled cheese, and she would tell him about her day while he listened to every detail, how he would help with homework at the kitchen table, even when he was exhausted from his overnight shift. "I never miss a school event," he said, with quiet pride. "Never miss a homework check. Never miss a bedtime story. She's all I've got, and I'm all she's got." It was done on construction paper, the kind they use in elementary school art class. It showed two stick figures, one tall with messy hair, one small with pigtails, holding hands under a crooked yellow sun. There were green scribbles all around them that I realized were supposed to be trees. In the corner, written in Emily's careful second-grade handwriting, it read, "To the best daddy tree in the world. Love, Emily." "She made this for me the night before the performance," David said, his voice catching slightly. "She said we were both trees in the forest, and that I was the biggest, strongest tree who kept all the little trees safe." I felt something tighten in my chest as I looked at that simple drawing, at the love and trust it represented. David's voice grew quieter as he continued, "Your Honor, I made it to the school at 7:47, just 2 minutes late. But by the time I parked and ran to the auditorium, Emily's class was already on stage. I missed the first 5 minutes of her performance." He paused, swallowing hard. "When I found her afterward, she didn't cry. Emily never cries about stuff like that, but I could see it in her eyes. She had been looking for me in the audience during those first few minutes. She had been her very best tree, standing so still and proud, waiting for her daddy to see her. And I wasn't there." The courtroom was completely silent now. Even the court clerk had stopped typing. She forgave me, of course. She always does. But I let her down that morning, and no amount of apologizing can change that. David looked down at the drawing again, then back up at me. "I know I was speeding. I know I broke the law. But I wasn't being reckless or careless. I was just, trying to be the father she deserves. Trying not to let her down. I failed anyway, but I had to try." There was a long silence in the courtroom after that. I found myself thinking about my own children, about the times I had rushed to make it to their events, about the delicate balance every parent tries to maintain between responsibility and love. I've always believed that justice doesn't mean just mechanically applying the law. It means understanding the human being standing in front of you, understanding their intent, their circumstances, their reality. It means recognizing that sometimes good people make mistakes for the right reasons. David didn't speed out of recklessness or disregard for safety. He sped out of love, out of desperation. Out of that quiet panic every parent knows, the fear of not being enough, of letting down the one person who counts on you most. I looked at this tired, devoted father standing before me, clutching his daughter's drawing, and I made my decision. "Mr. Morales," I said, "you made a mistake that morning, but it came from the right place. You were trying to be present for your daughter, trying to keep a promise, trying to be the father she needs you to be. I'm not going to fine you for that. I'm not going to punish you for loving your child." You could see his shoulders drop just slightly. That quiet relief that only someone who has been carrying too much weight for too long would recognize. For a moment, I thought he might cry. As he carefully placed Emily's drawing back in his folder and turned to leave, he hesitated at the door. Then he looked back at me and said, simply, "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me, for seeing us." And that, more than any fine collected, more than any law strictly enforced, is what this courtroom is really about. Not just tickets and violations and municipal codes, but people, real people with real lives and real love and real struggles. Sometimes, the story behind the mistake is worth more than the punishment. Sometimes, understanding is more powerful than penalty. Sometimes, justice means recognizing the difference between a criminal act and a desperate act of love. As David walked out of my courtroom that day, I thought about Emily, probably in her classroom, still proud of her performance as the best tree in the forest. And I thought about her father, the biggest, strongest tree of all, who would always be there to keep her safe. That's a case that will stay with me forever. Not because of the legal precedent it set, but because of the reminder it gave me. Behind every case, there's a human story. And sometimes, that story changes everything.